And we're live in 3, 2, and welcome everybody to another episode of the Planet Mullins podcast. Da-da-da-da. Today I've got a giant duck. Oh.
Yeah, let me duck out of the way here. I can't remember why I had this background on here.
I love it.
Leave it.
I think it's hilarious. You know, it's very IE, and we'll get into what the IE is for all the viewers around the world as we chat today with a jazz virtuoso bass player, all-around good guy, and one of my favorite young friends who's a college dropout making tons of money after leaving college behind.
Yeah, it was a tough decision, but certainly don't regret that now. All right, there we go.
All right, so yeah, Bryan, how are you, man? What have you been up to?
I'm good. I just got back from the alignment shop. Actually, I was working on my truck last couple days because got the week off work, which is kind of nice, and no Super Bowl this year, so I'm kind of looking forward to a low key week.
That's pretty cool, man. Well, when we first met, you had recently left Citrus College, I think it was, and then you were looking at getting into a trade, and then all of a sudden you just became so busy I could never get a hold of you. So why don't you tell people what it is that you've been doing and exactly what your career is about in addition to your music now?
Yeah, so I was going to college as a both jazz-based performance major and also an engineering student. And that was great. I went to Azusa Pacific, played in the A band there. Had a great time under David Beatty, who's a fantastic trombonist and a wonderful teacher to study with. And
cool.
Doing a little bit of audio recording at the time, and that just kind of turned into almost like a little side gig for me in college, where I could EQ a bass amp, so why couldn't I run a mixing console or do a little bit of Pro Tools? But kind of as I went on, I got deeper and deeper into that industry, and I did a lot of recording arts, and did a few Pro Tools classes, and I started to do live mixing at that point. And kind of as everything went on, I figured, well, there's also a big industry for sports broadcasting, kind of with similar skill set, but just a very different industry. So,
okay,
it's pretty appealing because it pays probably 5 to 10 times more than running a mixing board for sports rather than doing music. So I said, well, screw it. Let's go out and start doing some sports audio stuff. And from there, I was able to kind of fall into the general engineering field of what it actually takes to put what you watch at home on your TV, and kind of just work my way into the industry and put a lot of the engineering classes that I had taken in college and actually use some of the skills, like I think a lot of people that go to school. And I landed myself a job with a company called Game Creek Video, and we're the second largest provider of these television trucks in the U.S. So, if you watch the Super Bowl on Fox, that's us. World Series on Fox, that's us. NBA Finals, most of the Fox football season, both college and professional. I mean, it's a really great company to work for, and we have trucks pretty much about anywhere for any event you might watch on your television. So it's a really good job, but it takes up a lot of my time, and it's a lot of traveling.
Well, I can imagine. I mean, not that long ago, at about 5:30 in the morning, I was leaving Denver after finishing a gig there at Dazzle Jazz Club, and I was thinking about you, and we ended up we were on the C concourse, so we actually were about 100 feet from each other, just randomly. The Denver airport at 5:30 in the morning. It was too early to go get a beer. But
I don't think it's never too early to go get a beer.
well, man, that's an IE statement right there, man. Because in Denver, the bars at that airport don't open till 7, and
Yeah.
but wow, that's just got to be a great gig to get to travel like that and make that much money. Now you're actually in one of these trucks. Like, what do? You set up the microphones and run all the mics there and the cameras, or what is it exactly?
No, so I'm actually in charge of all the technology that is. So I interface with whatever network we're working with, and we kind of come in with show specs, and it's kind of my job to do all the engineering and design that goes into putting that show on the air. So it's a lot of making sure like the audio guys have what they need, make sure they have the correct configurations. It's a lot of computer work,
Uh huh.
a lot of staying organized, a lot of interfacing with people, making sure they have what they need. But ultimately, if it's in the truck, it falls under my responsibility.
I see. So, like, for example, if you're doing an NBA game somewhere, how many
Mhm.
microphones does it take to do an NBA game?
It's actually not much.
Really?
Sports is at least compared to recording music, it's generally very simple, and the environment is kind of just like get in, get it done, and get out. That's how we roll. Because like to do an NBA game, we're there one day early, set everything up, do the game, and we're out. And the whole studio environment rolls down the road in 1, 2, sometimes 3 trucks to wherever we're going for the next show.
Wow.
So to get back to your original question, it's usually you have 2 mics for the commentators, and then generally a spare mic up there. You'll mic the basket hoops
Oh,
to actually get that net swish. So you take a little tiny mic and you bury it up in the net.
oh, wow.
Um, then sometimes some floor mics to get the shoe squeaks, and
Shoe squeak
so
mics.
yeah. Then generally a mic on each camera and a couple crowd mics in the room. But really, it's not much.
Sounds like
Where
fewer mics than you would use at a good drum studio, because I
yeah,
know Carmen has like 13 to 15 mics on a drum set.
it's a little different when you do big games. Like if you do NBA finals, or you do a big um, postseason baseball, or any big sporting event will have a lot more. But a general event, it's very simple, and it's meant to just be set up and sometimes same day as the game.
Is
um,
everything wireless as far as the mics go now, or is it all wired?
we use a lot of Dante. If any of you techie guys are familiar, we use Dante and AES-67, which are audio over IP transport protocols. So it's I'm more of a network engineer now than anything, after kind of falling into this side of the industry. It's the job is getting closer and closer to an IT guy rather than a traditional like video engineer.
Okay.
But most things, it plugs in with a cable to a converter box, and that goes back to the truck over a network switch. And then we use Calric mixing consoles, which aren't common at all in the music industry.
No, I never
Um,
heard of those.
it's a British company, and it's just kind of the industry standard in the US. Just like you'd think of Yamaha or solid state logic, or anything like that on the studio side. It's
Uh-huh.
just what everybody knows and what everybody likes to use. So every single one of our trucks has a Calric mixing console in there.
Nice. So you've been doing this gig for a few years now. I mean, it's been really hard to catch up with you and stuff. Is it? Are you mostly like driving the trucks from from San Francisco to Miami or something, or do you fly a lot, or how does that work?
So I always fly, with a few exceptions. I mean, like if it's we have a whole travel agency that handles engineers, and I don't want to drive the trucks. I'd probably crash them, because they're they're 53-foot semi trailers that
Wow.
are large, and they're entirely custom built. There's a fabrication company in Ohio that builds like military mobile command centers and hospital MRI trailers, and they also build our TV trucks.
Wow.
but they're, entirely custom built, ginormous semi trailers, and I'm by no means qualified to drive one of those.
Right. So
Uh,
you fly there and then you take a Uber over to the stadium and then you get in the truck and get it all going. Is that how you do it?
yeah, so I work on my current truck. It's a 2 unit truck, AB unit. So I've got two awesome truck drivers that they'll come in, hook up the trucks, get them all closed up. They'll drive it to whatever the next gig is, and then after that we meet them there. We'll get everything set up on site, and it's cool because everything collapses like a giant origami, kind of fold up set. So
Oh, wow.
you've got desks that slide in and out. You have walls that move, floor pieces that have to fold up. So, but ultimately, you want to have a studio size room that can roll down the roads. So,
Incredible.
in order to meet the DOT regulations for how big a semi truck is, it has to be under 80,000 pounds. I think it's 13'6" tall and 53 foot long, and 8.5 feet wide. I think are the I don't know. Don't quote me on that, but
Okay.
you take something that is the size of a professional studio and fold it up like a little origami duck into a package that can roll down the road like that.
There's that word, the duck again, with you and your giant duck. Well,
Yeah,
I think it's really indicative of your a great sense of humor that has been something that we've kind of shared as our disdain for all kinds of things in the universe, and we've had some good laughs over people that we've been around, and we've been in some kind of sticky situations too. I remember when I first brought you out to Venice after we met at that gig we were playing in Brentwood. You were around on the night that we closed up Danny's Venice, and
yeah.
I got to thank you for your life saving skills from that night from keeping me from getting killed because we had finished the gig and some guy's girlfriend got really blasted and she was screaming and making everything bad, and I told her to calm down, but I don't think those were my exact words.
Yeah, I
And
think it might have been a little bit more colorful than that,
a
but
little more colorful than that. And then the next thing I knew, I was being rammed by this guy who just kind of grabbed me, and then he ran me right into the bottom of the front door of the club at about 15 miles an hour after traveling 30 feet. And I was laying there going, "What happened?" And you were nice enough to just like pick me up and say, "Okay, Mullins, that's
let's
enough."
go. Well, I think ironically we were kind of on our way out by that point too. I mean, you guys had played your set and we
Right.
had some drinks, and I think they were,
They
because they
were
were
close.
closing down the bar, they were just trying to get rid of everything there. So
Right.
you know,
That was just an epic night. And then we also had some fun too when I put you on that album as the bass player for the onlyinvenice.com
yeah,
album called Only in Venice. And then we'd done a few parties and a few other things. And I ran across pictures of us with Brian Head at that thing that we did in downtown LA with that girl singer and the Asian girl piano player a few years ago. And the years are really rolling by quick, man.
yeah.
I think I've known you already about 5 years, and you're not even 30 yet, right? How old are you?
No, I just turned 27 a little over a month ago, and
Wow.
I feel like I'm getting old.
Well, it kind of happens because the out there in the news right now is the news that Facebook shares are tanking and
Mhm.
Facebook is really losing popularity. And it was a thing where sometimes these big mega corporations like Facebook or Disney or Amazon, they'll see the competition coming, which was the case when Instagram came around.
Yeah,
So, 5 years ago, 8 years ago, younger people were all saying, "Oh man, no, Facebook isn't cool anymore. Let's all go to Instagram." So people went to Instagram, and then, people in my age range were like, "Oh, Instagram, that sounds interesting." And the first thing that happened was Facebook bought Instagram.
yep,
So then, out of the blue, here comes TikTok, which is where all the kids are. And
Yeah, I don't have one actually. That's where I've drawn the social media line. I
you're
don't have.
old. You're
I
old,
know.
Mackenzie. You're over the hill. You're old. You're working a corporate job, and you're not on the internet doing kid stuff anymore.
Yeah,
But I've not ever joined TikTok, but I did when my distributor for my music products contacted me a couple of years ago. They said, "Well, we put some of your stuff up on this new thing called TikTok, and you should go over there and check it out." So I went to Google, I typed in Rob Mullins TikTok, and the biggest, most popular song, which wasn't popular at all, it had like 50 people that were on it or whatever,
yeah,
was the thing that I wrote in 5/4 called 5/4 3 2 1, and it's a way offbeat, like really wacky, hard to follow 5/4 groove, and there was
yeah.
all these like 10 to 12 year olds like jamming to my 5/4 5/4 jazz thing, making faces.
I mean, the internet is a strange place. I think the thing that keeps me away from social media, because I have an Instagram that I post. I post on there. I don't think I've posted on Facebook in probably 3 years now, if not more.
I haven't seen you on Facebook in years now.
I mean, I lurk around there, I guess, and kind of. I'm on a few pages. Like um, I like old cars and old mechanical things, and so I'm on a few pages just to find parts. I love trains too. That's that's always been a hobby of mine. So I'm on a few photography pages and railroad pages and that kind of stuff. But
Uh-huh.
as far as my personal page goes, I maybe update my profile every other year, and you know maybe put a snarky comment and somewhere. But as far as posting stuff, I don't really like it. I don't really want people knowing what I'm doing, to be honest.
Well, it's harder and harder to maintain any kind of privacy or any anonymity these days. And back in the early days of the web, when I was younger, not that I was young then, but when the internet got invented, it was really fun.
Yeah.
It was so fun because you could, adopt several identities. AOL had 5 screen names per account. And
I still have an old Verizon email address that I've probably had for maybe 15 years now, and it's just no letters and no spaces on that handle. It's just jazz bass, and I can't believe I still have it.
that's the one that pops up when I email you. It says Jazz Bass McKenzie at Verizon or something.
Yeah, pretty similar to that at least.
Yeah,
But
something
like
like that.
now you have to put at 1295 dash underscore 11 whatever, just to get whatever something that you can remember.
Doesn't it kind of freak you out in a way? Because this is where I was leading with the AOL thing, is that in the early days we did the internet for fun. So somebody would have, their kind of their businessy name, and then I had a friend who was who loved the Jetsons. So
Yeah.
he had one called George Jetson at AOL.com.
Mm-hmm.
And we would go into these tech rooms. He was a really bright guy. And then I had one called Jetson's Dog.
Yeah.
So we would both go into a chat room, and then he would scold me and tell me to shut up, and I would say woof 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 all the time and disrupt everything. And you can't really do that kind of stuff now, because now what's so crazy about it is the first thing that happens if you're going to start any type of an account is they want your birthday.
Yeah.
And as soon as that started happening, I was like, there is something really sketchy about this, because if I want to have an email account, what business is it of company XYZ to know where did I grow up? How old am I?
Mm-hmm.
What is my full legal name?
Yeah.
Where do I reside exactly? Yeah, does that strike you as weird at all?
Yeah. I feel people like my age, I was born in 1995, and everybody, you make me feel old. It's like, well, I'm almost 30, so go away. But being born then, I can remember not having the internet. I didn't have a cell phone until say early high school, and it was a flip phone. I didn't have texting. My parents wouldn't let me have texting. But like, I think people born about 94, 95 are kind of the last era of people that remember, growing up without the internet. Even though it was around, I wasn't on it. I didn't have an
Right.
iPad as a 5-year-old.
Right.
I just think it's crazy when, I'm sitting at the airport and there's a kid that has a MacBook, an iPad, and an iPhone, and he's, 10.
Right.
That's $5,000 worth of tech right there.
It's amazing how the Apple universe has grown to such a point that not only is that technology kind of a status thing, because parents, if they can afford all that Apple junk, they will gladly have their kid being seen with it and parading it around like it's a badge of honor of some type, that they've got everything Apple. And I'm in between you and my uncle in terms of age groups and stuff, and he worked on the early Apple computers, and I guess he's 75 or 76, and his thing is, he said, man, nothing has been more destructive to society than the invention of the computer, the invention of the internet, and Apple. And when you take those things, so I lost you there for a second, but glad you're back. So my uncle says that the internet and the computer were and are kind of responsible for the destruction of the normal functioning of society.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, how do you feel about that? Because as you were saying, you were kind of like not an early adopter, but a late adopter, but still in that younger generation.
Well, it certainly has its pros and cons. I think having just having the wealth of information at your fingertips now is fantastic. There's no going to the library and looking up. Like I was working on my car the last couple of days. Putting in. I've got a Toyota Tacoma, so wanted to put in some new off-road suspension, and instead of having to sift through manuals, I could just go on Google and say, hey, Toyota Tacoma front coil spring replacement. Boom, you get 10 YouTube videos of guys doing the job, and you can kind of, I have a lot of experience working on cars, but sometimes, somebody's figure out a way to do it. And,
Right.
you have that wealth of knowledge at your fingertips. At work, because I'm in charge of so many things that, sometimes I don't feel qualified to be in charge of. You kind of get yourself into a bind while you're writing some code or programming a piece of equipment, and you say, how do I get myself out of this bind? And boom, Google gives you 500 different ways to do it. So I think that's a very good part.
Right. Sure.
The part I don't like about it is it's like everything is now monetized. I mean, absolutely everything. And your browsing history, your location, what you did on Tuesday, internet security and monetization of everything is kind of terrible.
Well, it's frightening. I mean, I consider it frightening. One of my other older friends who's in her 80s is the person that introduced me to the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And she's, often says, why I can't believe how different it is and how bad it's all become, because there isn't one keystroke that anybody ever types that isn't recorded.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is recorded. Whatever it is, it's all happening. So, what?
I said I found a few ways around that, and kind of dealing in the job that I do and trying to keep our engineering network safe, because that you could theoretically take down a major sporting event by hacking into one of our trucks. It's gotten that easy. Well, I'd say that easy, but
it's possible though.
Yeah. But like at home, I have a firewall that I've built. PFSense is a great free firewall software that you can run and build at home. just on an old computer, or because occasionally I'll come across hardware from work that's getting disposed of or whatever. So I've got a few tech projects, but because of that, I don't get ads on my computer at home. I've got a bunch of filtering set up so I can watch YouTube without ads.
Oh, wow.
I can browse the internet and it knocks out a lot of pop-ups and that kind of stuff. But then I go on a public network in a coffee shop and it's like, wow, it's like being bombarded.
Yeah, I especially hate browsing on my phone.
Yes.
I have sorry, I got a little bit of a cold today. My nose is kind of running. But, I'll pull up Chrome. I use a Samsung Galaxy telephone, and I'll pull up Chrome, and it says, and I'll say, okay, give me the news, local news. And I'll say, homeless people run amok in Venice Beach, LA Times. And I go, okay, let me click on that. And so I want to read that article, but what happens is as soon as I click on it, the entire screen is covered with this giant pop-up thing that says, you only have one more article that you can read by any LA Times author until you subscribe, and it's only going to be 10 cents a day or whatever. And then you're sitting there and you're like, oh, man. And then you're looking for this little teeny checkbox to close the ad, and you close it. And then if you set the phone down and you come back in 30 seconds, your phone can be going absolutely nuts with 10 other ads.
Yeah.
That all just kind of show up. It's just turned into kind of it's almost like a garbage can.
Well, it's a far cry from, going out to and finding a paper machine and throwing in a few quarters and, there you go. That's it. I've paid my money. Give me my paper.
Give me my news.
I think the subscription-based model that everybody's going to, I mean, I understand it from a business perspective, but at the same time, being in the Apple ecosystem and having a lot of Adobe products, and it's like, we went from spending, $500 or $700 to buy Pro Tools or a couple $100 on Logic or whatever to, kind of put a nickel in every time you want to use it, or, it'll only be $100 a year, or it'll only be $200 a year, or,
right.
But you subscribe to enough stuff. It's like, wow, I'm paying $1,000 a month in subscriptions just to, have everything I need to be successful at my job or to read the news or,
right. It's very annoying, man. I recently became part of the Roland Cloud, and Roland was an instrument company that, when I was younger, I loved their hardware synthesizers and drum machines, and I still love them. And there was a 12-year period went by in there where all of my hardware and physical stuff had worn out. Yeah. And I used to have a big studio room full of all this stuff, and one by one they kept pooping out, and I kept not being able to repair them or get parts. Yeah. And then about 6 months ago, I found out that they were making all this stuff in a cloud-based situation. And I went, great, man, because I loved my XP80 and I loved my 808 drum machine and I loved my Super Jupiter and I loved my JV80. And now I have all those things in the box on my MacBook. But the problem is that I have to pay a monthly fee, and then there's also other fees on top of it. Like if you want a standalone plugin, then you can buy it for a year, or you can buy it in the pro level, or you can buy it at the ultimate level, or you can buy a lifetime key. And the next thing you know, you're just like, man, this is so confusing, right?
Yeah. Well, it's just, licensing for that stuff. You need a license. I mean, I don't know. It's been a while since I've bought Logic. Is Logic a subscription-based platform yet? Okay.
No, it's not. And it's really great because it's $200 and they upgrade it constantly. And they're in such a powerful position as financially the most successful company ever to be on the planet Earth. Yeah. That they are systematically just absorbing, without licensing, as far as I can tell, every other DAW and music program. So the last thing that they did probably 8 months ago is they basically just stole Ableton. And they put Ableton Live into Logic, and it's called Live Loops. And a little thing will pop up in system preferences, and it'll say, there's an update for Logic Pro, and I go, okay, cool. And I've got a really nice computer now that'll kind of handle it with plenty of storage and lots of RAM and solid state hard drive and all that. And the next thing I knew, I'm looking at this thing and I'm going, wait a minute, I've seen this design before. They just totally ripped off Ableton Live completely. So, those are some of the things that are good. I mean, I think the plugins that Roland is doing sound really fantastic because you get all the original waveforms of all those original hardware machines. It's based on those waves and they live on your computer. The problem is that Roland Cloud keeps coming back into your machine to check what is your subscription status. Yeah. And if anything expires, then apparently it all just goes away. And if you're in the middle of a busy album project working and you lose half of your plugins because of the Roland Cloud, nobody is happy about this. I mean, I'm part of the KVR audio website, which is a really good website for anybody that's into music production. I think it's just KVR audio.com or KVR.com. And they have forums where the Roland Cloud thread and the instrument topic is one where it's just hundreds of pages of guys like me just going, damn it.
Yeah. Well, even on my side of the industry in the sports world, it's we're using a lot of hardware that is, kind of similar to plugins. You just say, I want, like we use the replay servers, which are just giant, RAID hard drives that can record and play back video. And everything is done in raw format too. So it's really high bandwidth. These boxes are actually pretty astonishing. You think like one 1080p video stream is 3 gigabytes of data every second. So if you think of 4K, which is 4 times the resolution, that's 12 gigabytes of data a second.
Wow.
And these servers are recording that, 80, 90 channels of video. Each one is 3 gigabytes per second of data. I mean, it's just terabytes per second, but there's licensing that runs all that. So you say, oh, we're doing some super slow-mo cameras for a football game. So you can see the touchdown and, some guy gets tackled and you can watch his neck break. And, and it's really cool having access to that at the sporting events. Cause you're like, oh, let me rack that back and look at it. All the engineers sit around and we watch guys get messed up in slow motion or people puking or, cause you have so many cameras around the stadium. We get a great look at everything, but your licensing runs out and it's like, well, we need this license code cut for the day of the game. And it's, it's a scramble sometimes to be like calling the office. Hey, I need my codes. It's
especially on the week.
The whole industry is like that.
A lot of the stuff that you do is at times that, a corporate office would normally be closed anyway, right? Yeah. I mean, fortunately for us, once the code is cut, the box doesn't lose its functionality until it's turned off. Okay.
So, it's kind of a fail safe just in case, you're getting kind of close on the end of the code. But it's a 24-hour a day job, working weekends and holidays. And sometimes it can be a little tough to, you gotta rouse the office and be like, hey, I need my super slow-mo codes for, the football game I'm working. And, but we use waves a lot at work as well.
Okay.
We have wave servers on the trucks and same thing, we're virtualizing equipment that way. And it's, give me my licensing bundle.
Yeah, it really is. It's amazing how, the profit margins also and all of this stuff are just ginormous. I mean, and when you look at, some of the situations that are going on our planet, for years it was, the starving children of Africa. And then it was, everybody's got to save the animals from extinction. And now out here, it's save the homeless and all of that. Well, you think of all those things and then it comes across on your news feed that Jeff Bezos from Amazon, who's got who knows how many billions of dollars. Well, just for fun, he has his own spaceship.
Yeah.
Now that's just for fun. It's not because he needs to go to space. But what I thought was so funny is when he launched that thing, I watched Reddit and I watched I watched Facebook and Instagram, and the overwhelming, resounding message about that was people said, "Don't come back." Just, we never liked you. You're ripping everybody off. You own everything, and there's some sort of weird thing that happens to people when they get to be so successful that they have too much money and too much time on their hands. I think they get a little weird somehow.
I mean, I hate to talk politics and argue about that stuff with people, but it's just tough to be a middle class dude anymore. I mean, I make a good living, especially for a guy my age, but I feel like I've just been chasing buying a house for the last like 3 years. You look at like my folks' house, and they bought it for, I don't know, 150 grand back in the late 80s, early 90s, and the house next door to them is for sale for like $916,000 right now, and it's like a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. It's insane, and
wow,
to kind of be a guy my age just trying to have a normal life, it's a little bit tough.
I don't think it's even possible now, sadly. I think I think there's been a squeeze put on, and it's a squeeze on the middle class. It's very sad. It's really obvious out here, because out here, a 1-bedroom place with no parking is like $3,500 to $5,000 a month rent.
Yeah.
And you start thinking about that. And I know people who have lived here longer than I have. I've been in and out of this area since the 90s, but I know people who have been here were, paying $500. And now, because of rent control or whatever, they're paying $1,500 over the years. But the problem is that, as my uncle, who's an economist that I mentioned, he says, through all of these problems and the things that have been happening with the virus and other things with, the political dramas and traumas and stuff, the people at the very top of our system have been making billions of dollars through all of this.
Yeah.
They are not suffering in the least bit. COVID didn't slow them down. The elections, the shift in the politics, none of that slowed them down. The big crash of 2008, which was one that just basically ruined my life. I'm still trying to come back from that. And that's been 14 years ago.
Yeah.
Didn't affect those people. Mm-hmm. So they're still able to do whatever they want. So if you're the, nephew or the stepkid or the kid or the grandkid of that very teeny little group that owns and controls all the stuff, you can pretty much do what you want. But for people like you and, people like me, and I think a lot of musicians, it's just frickin' impossible now, because you can't really do it. I'll take a bike ride around here and I'll look at a house that's basically falling down. It's not good. It's got, it's boarded up, and there's all kinds of problems, and the roof is leaky, and the concrete's bad. Those are like $1.5 million.
Yeah.
And then somehow somebody always shows up to pay $3 million for that.
I don't know who they are.
I don't know who these people are either, but they come in and they do it. And then you start thinking to yourself, well, now everything is, what do they call it? Overvalued or overstocked, or what is the financial term for that?
I don't ask my tax guy.
Well, anyway, it's just so priced out of the market is what, I'm agreeing with you on your main point, that I don't know how anybody is able to just, get married, have a family, have a nice house, not worry about money, keep the working hours to like 40 to 50 a week. I think those days are just done for a lot of people. And I'm really sad to see us in that situation, because I don't think that it's fair. And when you start looking at who are the people that actually control everything in the world, none of us know who those people are.
Yeah.
You can't find them. You can't call them. I mean, there's Bezos from Amazon, and there's Bill Gates from Microsoft, and Tim over at Apple and stuff. But somehow the whole system has kind of shifted its
Yeah.
thing. It's on an angle now, and I don't know how to change that really.
Well, it's just tough to be an average dude anymore, like, and that's, I think, unfortunately, like, why I kind of got out of being a musician, and I don't play, especially, I used to play a good amount still with this job, but once the pandemic kind of shut down a lot of the
Right.
the local jams and the small little gigs that were just kind of easy to be, oh, I'm home for 4 or 5 days, let's just pick up a restaurant gig or a quick wedding or something like that.
Sure.
It's just not really around much anymore. And
No.
I'm very thankful for the job that I have, because my company kept us on the payroll during the pandemic, and
Wow.
nobody was that lucky, and I'm very, very thankful for that. But it's tough because I love playing, and I miss going out and playing on the weekends, or
Sure.
being in band and college, and but like it's just, a lot of my friends are struggling, just it's a mess, and good musicians are struggling too. It's not like they're bad at their instruments or anything. It's
Well, you're exactly right, and to your point, you on top of that, in the way that the general public and the average person looks at musicians and recording artists is not anywhere close to what the actual reality of it is, because
Mhm.
you see somebody out there, and they're on my Facebook page, and they go,
Yeah.
wow, this guy votes at the Grammys, and he's done 40 albums, and he's got to be so wealthy, and gets to do whatever he wants, and there he is riding his bicycle again,
Yeah.
down by the canals. But somehow there's not a ladder with rungs on it in the general public's mind when it comes to recording artists. And my
Mhm.
example that I always use is the Taylor Swift example. So the Taylor Swift example is that there's one person at the very top there that is Taylor Swift, and she makes who knows how many millions of dollars, how many billions of dollars. And she was set up and financed by her dad, who owns this giant meat packing company in the southern U.S., the Swift Meat Company.
Yeah.
And she resonated with a lot of young people, and everybody loved it. But in the public's mind, they see Taylor Swift, and then they think, oh, well, every other singer out there that I like is making the same money or having the same
Yeah.
life, and they're so rich and they do so much. Then to compound it even worse is that then, in order to have tax write-offs for all of this ridiculous amount of money that those people make, is they all start charitable foundations,
Mm-hmm.
and then they give what would go to the IRS, they would just give that to their foundation so they could write it off their tax.
Yeah.
So then you shift down the ladder, go all the way to the bottom where us jazz guys are at, and the public expects, well, you're not going to play that gig for profit.
Yeah.
You're going to get paid to go play. That's horrible. I just saw Taylor Swift give $10 million to the treatment to improving treatment to Australian Animals Foundation, and Rob, you didn't make any donation at all, so you're just not as cool as Taylor Swift. What is wrong with you, Mullins? See, these are the things that I think, frankly, come up when those of us that are on the inside, like you and I are, and the challenges that we face. That's one of the reasons I like doing the show, because you're just honestly sitting there saying, hey, dude, being middle class is not possible, even with a great job. And I would say, of all the people I know in your age range, and I know a few really great musicians,
Mm-hmm.
the ones that have moved to New York and are like waving from the subway and everything, their parents are paying those bills.
Mm-hmm.
They're not out there, playing the Blue Note and the Village Vanguard and making a living. They're not.
Yeah.
They're,
I was actually just in New York, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, and like, it was actually my first time there. I'd never been to New York before.
Wow, great.
And I just, so I got out to a couple clubs and just kind of did a little bit of sightseeing, walked around, because I was working out there, so it was kind of that's what I do like to do with all my traveling. It's like, well, if I get a a day off somewhere, take advantage of it.
Oh
The
yeah,
company's paying for the travel anyways. So, you
sure,
know,
great.
um, but just like you go out and get a cup of coffee and it's like $6 or $7, and you get a slice of pizza and it's $10, and you can rent a shoebox for $3 a month out there. It's like, how does anybody afford to live here?
That's really insane, man. I heard from one of the friends that I have out there who's a musician that still smokes cigarettes, and I still smoke cigarettes. And cigarettes in Manhattan are $20 a pack now.
Wow.
So that's $1 per cigarette,
Yeah.
20 in a pack. And I can't, out here you can still get cheap brands for about, a discount place for maybe $10 a pack, but
Yeah.
at $20 a pack, man, I would have to just say
Just forget it. Hang it
I'm
up.
just going to have to find something else that I'm going to have to do. Well, did you hear any jazz when you were in New York? Did you have time to club at all or no?
Yeah, I went to Birdland and just saw, a little, it was like a local house ensemble. Really, there wasn't anybody, super great playing. I mean, the band was really good, not to discount the musicians, but there was nobody famous playing that weekend. But it's kind of cool. Just kind of say I went there, got a t-shirt,
Right.
did a little. I try not to be a tourist because I hate doing touristy things for the most part. But
I
it
do
was kind
too,
of,
man. When I first went to New York on my first trip, it was with an older mentor friend of mine, and we were there to study theory from George Russell, who is Miles and Coltrane's and Bill Evans' theory teacher. And the first thing that we did is we went to a airport shop, and I said, "Oh man, there's a Subway T-shirt. It's got a whole map
yeah.
of Subway." So of course I bought that shirt and I put it on. And then the first day we were walking to class, about every other person that walked by me just said tourist. And
Yeah.
I felt like such an idiot, It's like, oh, I don't want to wear this shirt anymore. But it's a thrilling historical landmark. New
Yeah.
York City is, and I have some friends who have somehow managed to stick it out there
Mhm.
and not, go down from the virus or whatever. And I don't really know how they're doing that, but it's great to play there. It was fun
Yeah.
to study music there, and it's fun to fly to parts unknown around the world because
Yeah.
those airports are busy, man. I remember a lot of times I would take a flight from LaGuardia or JFK over to Moscow
Yeah.
and go over there and play. Now, does your job is it all domestic, or do you go to Canada too, or how's that work?
Um, we've got a lot of hockey, so we do send guys up to Canada quite a bit. We actually have a truck over in China right now doing the Olympics.
Oh, how do you get
So yeah,
how do you get a truck to China?
you drive it to Ventura and throw it on a boat up in Port Hueneme up there and float it
What?
on over and then unload it over. We've actually done it a few times. But
Wow,
yeah, if you're watching the Olympics on NBC, chances are it's a Game Creek truck doing whatever you're watching. Um,
wow.
and because it's NBC, there's a few trucks in Stanford as well, where their headquarters are out there. So they're doing remote workflow stuff, and as well as we've got a truck over there sending. I think it's doing. I'd have to look and tell you exactly what we're doing. What events and stuff, but
So, over these years that we've known each other, we've met some really incredible people. And one of them that I think we have in common is this guy who's kind of like Frank Sinatra and Steve Gadd all built into one
yeah.
thing. He's a multi-talented threat, a guy named Dave Tull. You know Dave, right?
Yeah, so I'm an Upland High School graduate, a good old IE boy out
Yeah,
there,
the IE is
and
the Inland Empire for people who don't know what the IE is. And Bryan and I are both from the Inland Empire originally. So go ahead. Yes, you met
um,
Dave through your high school or something?
yeah, so he was the drummer for our high school choir concerts out there, and it was a blast. We'd do like a trio set beforehand, just bass, drums, and piano, and play some of his original music, which is absolutely fantastic. I mean, he's
He's
a
great.
great writer, great drummer, and he has a good sense of humor too.
Well, that's an
Um,
important thing to keep rolling because when I met him, I had told you previously about how we met and the gig that we were on and stuff, and just hanging out with him for the 10 or 15 minutes of the breaks on that gig. It was just as fun of a hang to just hang out with Dave Tull as it was to be on the bandstand playing the music and seeing him do these, ridiculous drum fills and licks while holding a high note at the like hitting a double C and then playing a Steve Gadd thing all at the same time. And isn't it important, don't you think? This is one of the reasons I always have enjoyed playing with you is the hang, which is the time that you're riding the bus or the time that you're at rehearsal or when you're eating a meal during the break or just, having a cocktail. The hang is definitely as important as the actual stage time to me.
Well, I would say it's as, if not more important, I think, and no matter what career you do, I've got guys at work that I like to work with, and I've got guys at work that I don't like to work with. And, it's important to be able, and, you kind of ask yourself, well, this guy might be really good at his job, but if I'm going to spend this much time with him, can we go out and have a beer and not want to kill each other at the end of the day?
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. And, it makes me reminiscent about the guys in some of these older bands that I just admired so much. And one of the bands that I was in after Joe Sample left was the Crusaders. And I grew up loving the Crusaders and stuff. And Ndugu Chancellor, who was part of the band, but also not part of the band, he and I became good friends. And he told me one time, he said, do you realize that Styx Hooper, Wayne Henderson, Joe Sample, and Wilton Felder were all offered $100,000 each to just take separate cars, go to the Hollywood Bowl, and play 2 hours? And they said no.
Yeah.
I mean, that's insane how people get so, polarized, I guess. Is that the current modern word that you're supposed to use for when people are on the complete opposite side of stuff? And from you and in those days, I was still I think it was in my late 20s, and I was thinking, man, I would have gone and done it for $500.
Yeah.
They're getting $100,000, and they're like, no, we don't need $100,000. No, that's okay. We'd rather.
It must be nice to be able to turn that down, But it is a balance, and you kind of, if you don't need the money and you hate each other, then I think I'd say no too.
Yeah, that's well, I got a chance to kind of hear everybody's side of those stories over time, and I could respect where they're coming from and stuff, but it just seems like, like you said, in whatever business, whatever line of work you're in, you'll find those people that you gravitate towards. And luckily for you, and also for me too, I mean, I think we both have good friends around that we like to be around, that we like working with, that we have similar senses of humor. We can say things that to our friends that would probably never be allowed on social media.
I don't want to permanently record those on this podcast, some of those late night conversations after a bunch of tequila. No,
that kind of stuff is just but it does make you as we wrap things up here today, because I know you got a busy schedule, it does make you kind of wonder how we went all the way from people like me and my uncle, who has got his whole set of views that he skews a particular way, and I have my views that are pretty much on the opposite side of him. But we've had these conversations, and we're not polarized against each other. We'll just have the conversations. He'll learn things from my views that he would have never thought of, because he doesn't see it the way I do. And I'll learn things from his views. And then at the end of it, there's never been a shouting match. There's never been a Facebook duel to the death, of the polarization sides or whatever. And we stay friendly, but that kind of social discourse that was really a big fabric to our society and our democracy, I think it's kind of become a thing of the past, which is why is why I really value a person like you. Because
Well, yeah, I think before we get off here, we should talk about, some of our similarities, growing up. You've got what, about 35, 40 years on me.
well, I
and
definitely do, yeah. Yeah,
but
but
just eating at the same spaghetti restaurant. It can't have this podcast without talking about Vince's spaghetti.
well, yeah, vintage spaghetti is really important, and I'm glad that you brought it up too, because that's one of the things about music and the music business that's so wacky is that when you're out there doing the freelance thing, pretty much anything could happen. Like the gig that Bryan and I, for everybody who doesn't know how we met, the gig that we did was something where I was pretty much on the gig all the time because that band leader could rely on my name as a draw, and he used me as the public face of his band, although he ran everything and took credit for everything and made more money than everybody else. But he was responsible for getting bass players to come do this gig. And 9 out of 10 times when he would be trying to get a new bass player to come in, he would say, I've got Rob Mullins on piano. And the bass players would go, oh, great. Okay, well, I've heard of Rob Mullins. I'd love to play with Rob Mullins. And in your case, I don't know that that was the case, but what I do remember is just showing up there, and here you were, this tall dude standing there with an upright, and we started shooting the breeze before the gig. And the next thing we know is like where I learned to skateboard at 7th and Euclid in Ontario, California in 1969 is the same medical center parking lot where you learned to skate.
Yeah.
And then we started talking about restaurants, and I said, man, from the time I was 5 years old, I've been eating at this place, this Italian place over off of Holton Mountain. He says, oh yeah, Vince's spaghetti. I eat there all the time. I grew up eating at Vince's. And then even crazier is that you had a friend named John Schlitt whose dad was best friends with my first drum teacher, Ed Brown, at Ed Brown Drum Center. And
he was on the gig with the Ed Brown Drum Center bag. I think that's
John had the Ed Brown Drum Center bag that was a 50-year-old bag, and I saw the stick bag sitting there, and it said Ed Brown Drum Center. I'm like, this can't be happening, because here I am with two guys that are about 22, and they're both from Ontario area, and one of them has an Ed Brown stick bag there. It was just so unbelievable. So, we have a commonality with the Inland Empire thing, and everybody's got their area codes, and 714-909 626, baby.
Yeah, 626. I still got my 626 area code.
626. And I'm out here in 310 land now, but it's a really pleasant association to have you in my friendship world, and also in my music world. And congrats to you for all the things that you've managed to accomplish by leaving college and just going for kind of setting your sights for something big, because what you've accomplished is unbelievably huge, especially for a person in your age group. And I'm super proud of you, bro.
Thanks. It's good. I'm happy I didn't finish college, and if it's not for everybody, but it worked for me. That's all I can say. I was just, I couldn't play the game anymore.
Well, and I think a lot of people now are really seeing that, what are you going to do with a philosophy degree? Where do you go with that unless you just go back into the same ecosystem of teaching? And
I'd say even a music degree in a certain extent. You don't need a degree to go out and play bass. I understand teaching and that kind of stuff, but there's a lot of great players that don't have degrees, and there's a lot of terrible players that do have degrees.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons I didn't really want to finish, because I thought, I'm going to be better served by getting out there and studying with George Russell and taking private lessons and just making my albums and getting out there in the world. And it's it's worked for me as well. So, all right, man. Well, I'll be putting this up on the air pretty soon, and hopefully we can get together for a Vince's Spaghetti Hang sometime in the near future. This is my guest today has been Bryan McKenzie, the fabulous bass player turned broadcast truck technology genius. And that's going to wrap it up for another episode of the Planet Mullins podcast. Bye-bye, everybody, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks for having me, Rob. It's good to finally get on here.
You too.
Bye.